On today's episode, Luke Richardson gets named as the 40th head coach in Blackhawks franchise history. I'll be going over Richardson's prior coaching experiences, his roles and tendencies as an assistant and also as a head coach at the AHL level, and then whether or not he's the right fit for the Blackhawks rebuild. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Today is Friday, June 24th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at Jack Bushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And if you're listening to this post-recording, if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode and you like what you're hearing, then please go and show some support. First, by following the podcast, which will only take a quick couple of seconds, literally just a quick click of the button will help me out tremendously. Also, be sure to go and leave the show 5 stars if you like what you're hearing today as well. And if you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then feel free to go and leave me a review as well, because I always greatly appreciate getting feedback from my tremendous listeners out there. And best of all, it's 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, whether that be through Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. It's all 100% for free. And if you go and follow the show right now, then you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And if you're not already watching the live video of today's episode, then be sure to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, because each and every episode throughout the rest of the summer and into training camp later on this fall, it's going to have a video attached to it as well. So if you haven't done so yet, please go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Go and hit the subscribe button for me. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm really trying to keep boosting those subscriber numbers up. Also, go and smash the like button for me down below and comment as to how you feel about Luke Richardson becoming the new leader of the Chicago Blackhawks rebuild. And last, also go and ring the bell, turn on those push notifications, so that way when every episode gets uploaded to YouTube, you'll be notified exactly when it happens each day. All right, enough of that. Welcome in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks, of course. And the big news coming out earlier this morning is that Luke Richardson has been named the new head coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. Kind of a surprising move. And what a heck of a week it's been for the Blackhawks on the head coaching front. Of course, earlier in the week, Kevin Weeks has that video come out on Twitter where he says Ryan Huska, the assistant coach of the Calgary Flames, had been named the new head coach of the Blackhawks, and everyone was really caught off guard, not because of Huska or anything, just more so because the timing of it. And we hadn't heard Huska's name really be mentioned in the conversation as a candidate at all. So that video was certainly shocking. It also seemed like it was just kind of a sudden decision from the Blackhawks. We didn't really hear anything. We heard about one interview happening, which happened to be with Luke Richardson here. But other than that, we weren't even sure any other interviews were even conducted. And then all of a sudden, Ryan Huska gets named the coach. It was like, what is going on? But then, of course, Weeks goes on to retract that statement. He deletes the tweet, and we know Huska did not, in fact, become the head coach of the Blackhawks. Long live Ryan Huska's tenure from behind the Blackhawks bench. It lasted a whopping 17 minutes, hypothetically. And then this morning, too, was even kind of a whirlwind, because early on in the morning, Scott Powers of The Athletic, who does a ton of great work. If you're not already following Scott on Twitter, as a Blackhawks fan, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because Scott is probably, in my opinion, the best on the beat for the Chicago Blackhawks. Always does an amazing job. His articles are incredible. He's very descriptive and gets the point across while also making it very entertaining. Really good at his job. But anyway, Scott Powers came out with an article this morning saying that the Blackhawks were expected to make a decision on their head coach within the next week. and that the final three candidates seemed to be Derek King, who, of course, was the interim for the majority of last season after Jeremy Colleton got fired, along with Luke Richardson and Brad Shaw from the Vancouver Canucks, who Frank Saravalli also mentioned a couple weeks ago that the Blackhawks requested a head coaching interview from him from the Vancouver Canucks to interview him as well. So that wasn't all that surprising to hear that those three were the final candidates. And, I kind of had my plan for the next week. I figured, maybe early next week, sometime in the next 3 to 4 days, the Blackhawks will probably have their decision on who it's going to be. I'm going to be able to get some good content out regarding these three candidates and everything. But nope, smack dab, just an hour later, Frank Saravalli again drops a bomb on us, saying that Richardson, in fact, has been hired by the Blackhawks to be their new head coach. So it's been a pretty chaotic week on the coaching front for the Blackhawks, but now they finally have their man. They finally have the leader of the rebuild, and that's exactly what this is going to be. All signs sure sounds like all signs point towards Richardson not being a short-term hire. The Blackhawks have him in the long-term picture. They feel that he's qualified to be the leader of this team, not only now, but when they do become good, hopefully not too long from now. But yeah, I'm not going to lie, folks. I'm super excited about this hire. I really like what I've heard about Luke Richardson. Of course, I had Scott Matla from Locked On Canadians on the show to talk about Richardson when word got out that the Blackhawks requested him for an interview. And everything I've heard about Richardson is that he's a very respected guy around the league. Everyone has only good things to say about him. He's kind of calm and quiet, but he also has that intensity and more so a presence that kind of just demands respect in the locker room. Everyone likes him. Everyone has respect for him. I saw Barstool Chief was texting someone who had played under Richardson and said, the old guys want to run through a wall for him, which, is nice to hear. It's a little bit cliche, but still nice to hear nonetheless. So it feels like Richardson is that calm, poised, but also ideal leader for what the Blackhawks find themselves in right now, where there's going to be a lot of young guys stepping onto the scene, trying to make their mark on the NHL. And for the Blackhawks, they're hoping that those guys are going to be key players one day down the road when that competitive window opens up again. So Richardson really feels like a good guy for that. I've heard that he's very respectable towards players, obviously being a former player himself, which I'll get into in just a second. But he's very player friendly. He's not trying to do anyone dirty or play any mind games of sorts like we've heard in the past. He just wants to do right by the guys. And as a former player himself, I'm sure he knows, what he liked to have out of a coach and kind of what worked for him and also what worked for other guys too. And I just love to hear that he has a really good presence and poise, but he also knows the X's and O's. I mean, this guy, he's got a ton of experience both on and off the ice. He played in 1,400 NHL games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Edmonton Oilers, the Columbus Blue Jackets. He played for a handful of teams throughout his long and successful career. And then once his playing days were over, he began pretty immediately as a coach. He joined on with the Ottawa Senators first back in the 2009-2010 season. He worked as an assistant there for about 3 years and then ultimately ended up getting promoted to becoming the head coach of the Binghamton Senators, which is Ottawa's AHL affiliate, of course. But he was the head coach there for 4 years. And interestingly enough, when doing some research on Richardson, I found out that after some time spent down with Binghamton, he was actually offered by Ottawa to come back up there and be an assistant coach once again, but he turned that down actually to remain the head coach at the AHL level because he envisioned himself as one day being a future NHL coach. So it sounds like this is something that he's always believed that he could do. He feels like he can have an impact from behind the bench, an impact on his players and push the right buttons and have success. And he's had that belief in himself for quite some time now. So I'm sure this is really a fulfilling moment for Luke Richardson becoming the new head coach of the Blackhawks, which I know it's been an absolute dumpster fire for the last couple of years now, particularly this past season. But it's an original six team and it's his first head coaching gig at the NHL level. So I'm sure he's very stoked about it, and I'm sure he knows what he's getting into, obviously. I'm sure that was a big part of the conversation between he and Kyle Davidson and company was, what he envisions this team playing out like the next couple of years with him behind the bench and how he's going to operate and get things back on track one day. It's not a rush process. They want to do things right so that when that window opens back up, it's going to be open for as long as possible. And, I'm sure that was part of the conversation, but Richardson, I mean, he's had that experience being around young guys, a coach at the AHL level, as I said, for 4 years. And as an assistant too, I'm sure he's dealt with many young players and has been around that type of environment before, especially recently up in Montreal. He was a coach there for 4 years, obviously. The most notable thing about his time in Montreal was probably when he took over for Dominique Ducharme against the Vegas Golden Knights and led Montreal to a victory over them in that series. But he also was there behind Claude Julien, who was a longtime NHL head coach. So he's got a lot of good experience at both levels, which I think plays part into this a lot. But most importantly, he's very well respected inside the locker room. He knows his X's and O's. He's a smart player. He's very, I don't want to say he's very cautious or wise with his approaches, I believe. Like, he's not going to just like snap at a guy for no reason. He's not trying to play games or anything of that sort. He knows how to go about his ways and get the best out of players, and that's by giving the message straight to them, not beating around the bush, having a good presence, that demands respect. And apparently guys respect him a whole heck of a lot. That's just what I keep hearing when I do some research on Luke Richardson. But everything I've heard about him has me really excited about this hire. And for the Blackhawks, this sounded like the direction they wanted to go. They wanted to go with an outside the box per se type guy, not just one of the typical coaches that just gets recycled as we see so often in the NHL. It's happening right now. I'm glad to see the Blackhawks go in their own direction because they need a fresh face to take over this team. And someone also who has good experience with young players and understands the situation they're brought into. If someone comes in like a Bruce Cassidy or a Peter DeBoer, they haven't been around those types of teams. I mean, to their credit, they've been coaching Stanley Cup contenders. The Blackhawks aren't there, and they're not going to be there for quite some time. So they need someone who's familiar with how to develop those younger pieces and build their way up. So I really am excited about this hire of Luke Richardson. Obviously, time is only going to tell whether or not this was the right decision. But according to me, this seems like the right type of hire that the Blackhawks made here. I think he fits everything they need. He's a good leader. He knows how to get the best out of his players. He's been around the AHL level and knows how important it is to develop down there. And also, this is his first time as an NHL head coach, and he's going to be trying to prove himself as well. And this has been something he's wanted for a long time. And I'm sure he's always envisioned himself being behind the bench since his playing days were over. So I'm super excited. And one last time, congratulations to Luke Richardson for being named the 40th head coach in Chicago Blackhawks history. All right, coming up in just a moment, I'm going to have more on Luke Richardson. I'll be getting into his previous roles with the Montreal Canadiens and also what this hiring of Richardson means for former Blackhawks interim coach Derek King. But first, I need to talk to you all about Built Bar, which is a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar. Summer is coming and you're going to need some food for being on the go. Well, Built Bars are the perfect snack to take with you everywhere you go. Throw them into your bags, throw them into your kids' backpacks, and make sure that everyone has a bar to be fueled for their summer adventures. And the best part about Built Bar is that they're both delicious and healthy. So there's no more sacrificing delicious food for health because with Built Bar, you can have both. And have you tried Built Bar Puffs yet? Because if not, then you're seriously missing out on one of the best tasting protein bars on the market with incredible flavors like banana cream pie or cinnamon churro, which literally tastes like a roasted marshmallow with cinnamon on it. It's incredible. They got birthday cake, which is sprinkles on it. They just sent me a new flavor, which is mud pie, which seriously tastes like brownie in a cup. It's amazing. And the best part about all of these incredible protein bars is that they're 150 calories or less and have 100 and have 17 grams or more of protein in each bar. And when you're eating them, you actually won't believe that these things are good for you. That's how delicious they are. So head on over to built.com right now and be sure to use our promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next order. That's built.com with the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your next Built Bar order. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, getting into segment 2 now on today's live episode. I also wanted to be sure to touch on what kind of roles Luke Richardson had in the past, particularly for the Montreal Canadiens, where he spent the last 4 seasons as an assistant. And I think this is a key thing for the Blackhawks, and it's one thing that I've talked about for quite a while now, not just through the past couple of months as they've gone about this head coaching search, but watching the team under Jeremy Colleton, it was just a broken system. It just didn't work. And yeah, maybe he had success over in Sweden using it on the smaller ice, but I remember even hearing Duncan Keith one time on the Spit and Chicklets podcast talk about running that system in North America doesn't really work because the ice is too big and there's too much space in order to recover. You're not able to get there fast enough because the ice is larger here in North America. So there were always just these faults with Jeremy Colleton's system, right? And it was pretty clear watching the Blackhawks night in and night out. They'd always have these defensive breakdowns, and that's what played a part in them being near the bottom of the NHL in terms of defense for the last handful of years. And I feel like a lot of us Blackhawks fans understand that until that defense and that system and the scheme they run in the defensive zone, until that gets better, they're not going to get better. It's that simple. And honestly, I've had this conversation with a lot of my buddies this year. You look at the Blackhawks defense on paper, and they really shouldn't be as bad as they were this season. Like Seth Jones got off to a slow start, but ended up having a pretty solid season, at least in my opinion. I know there's a handful of people out there who love to have that debate and love to hate on Seth Jones, regardless of what he does. But I mean, look at this Blackhawks defense from last season. Seth Jones, Jake McCabe, Connor Murphy. I know those two struggled together after being reunited from their days back from the United States Development Program. But Calvin DeHaan was in there too. I mean, that is not a bad top 4. It really isn't. But the goaltending, especially towards the end of the season when Kevin Lankinen was the guy, it was no good at all. And the system that they were running, it never seemed like it clicked with the players, and they'd always be caught in between, not sure who's going to cover a man out high or covering someone backdoor or in transition or something. There were just a ton of those breakdowns, right? And I've been calling for a while for the Blackhawks to whoever their new head coach is. Now we know it's Luke Richardson. I've been calling for them to get someone who has a good defensive scheme and knows what they're doing on the defensive side of things. And that's Luke Richardson's bread and butter. I mean, I talked about how he was a 1,400 game veteran at the NHL level. He had a very long and successful career being a defensive, grinded out, rugged defenseman. It's not like he was known for his offensive numbers or anything. No, he was known and was able to stick around in the league because of what he was able to do on the defensive side of things. So I think that's really important, and I'm sure that was something the Blackhawks put an emphasis on during their head coaching interviews and when they were looking at candidates, was someone that knows what they're doing in the defensive zone. And for the Montreal Canadiens, that's what Luke Richardson has been doing the past couple of years. Now, I know there's a lot of folks out there going to say, well, Jack, Montreal was the worst team in the league this year. What do you mean? I'm not kidding. I had this conversation with Scott Matla from Locked On Canadiens when he was kind enough to join me last week. By the way, if you haven't gone and checked out that video yet, be sure to go and do so, because Scott Matla knows a heck of a lot more about Luke Richardson than I do. I'm just telling you the research that I've done in the past couple of weeks and the articles that I've read here recently and all that good stuff. Scott Matla's been covering the Canadiens for quite some time now, and he's watched that team. So he has a lot more knowledge and knows about the tendencies of Luke Richardson a whole lot better than I do. So be sure to go and check out that video that I uploaded with Scott Matla from earlier on last week. And while you're there, be sure to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks, because I would greatly appreciate it. But in the past 4 seasons, Luke Richardson, as an assistant coach, has really been working with the defense of the Montreal Canadiens. And last season was really kind of an outlier because that Canadiens team was just so banged up. I mean, the injuries completely plagued them and derailed them. They obviously didn't have Carey Price as well. They didn't have Shea Weber. It was a nightmare on all fronts for Montreal, but it did land them the first overall pick this season. So maybe the Blackhawks can take a little something away from that. But before that, obviously, Montreal had just gone on an insane postseason run that took them all the way to the finals where, yeah, I mean, they lost to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who they're on the verge of being defeated by the Colorado Avalanche to ruin the three-peat, but 3 consecutive Stanley Cup appearances, two of them being victories, maybe 3. I'm not going to rule them out just yet because if there's any team that can come back from down 3-1, it's those Tampa Bay Lightning and also the 2013 Chicago Blackhawks against the Detroit Red Wings. But in that postseason run, there was a lot of success defensively by the Montreal Canadiens. They did a really good job, and also they were getting outstanding goaltending. And that was something that Scott Matla really made an emphasis on when we were talking. He mentioned how it's not a perfect system that Luke Richardson likes to run. He gives the players some freedom there. It's not really strict. It's just more so relaxed and go play and feel it out style, which I personally don't mind. I mean, these guys have been playing hockey their whole lives, and obviously they're pretty darn good if they're in the NHL and they know what they're doing. So obviously there are some things you want to clean up as a coach, and you want to help each player understand those things a little bit better. But for the most part, the teams are running the same systems and the same styles. There's nothing that's all that much different between team to team. So I kind of like that relaxed mentality, especially for the opposite style of Jeremy Colleton, where a lot of the guys were just so focused out there on the ice on what they were supposed to do. It just didn't seem like they had any freedom, and they were just restricted by that system and couldn't go out there and create and just react. That's what hockey is. You need to react. The game's happening so fast and even faster in today's NHL. You just need to be able to react. So I really like hearing that about Richardson's style. But what Matla mentioned to me was how the goaltender is a big part of it. It's not a perfect system, but if your goaltender is making saves, it's one that can be very effective. And, maybe that's not something that the Chicago Blackhawks are going to look forward to now. But one day down the road, maybe I'm not going to rule out Kevin Lankinen being a starter. I don't even know if he's coming back, though, to be fair. But Drew Commesso or whoever's going to progress one day down the road, if we have the right pieces, it's a system that certainly can work, and it's been proven to work at the NHL level. So those are kind of the roles that Luke Richardson has held with the Montreal Canadiens over the past few years. And I'm sure that's something the Blackhawks really like to hear, because if you've been watching them the past few years, then you know how much of a struggle it's been in their own zone. And that's been a huge reason why the record has not been all that good the past 3 seasons, or the past 5 or 6 seasons. I don't know why I said 3. But the last thing I wanted to talk about in particular with this hiring is what it means for Derek King, who of course became the interim last year. The Blackhawks actually got off to a roaring start when he was named the head coach, and had a lot of people thinking that he was going to get the interim tag removed from his name and he was going to be the guy to lead this team throughout the next handful of years. But ultimately, the second half just ended up kicking the Blackhawks' butts. They were terrible to watch, terrible all around. And while I don't want to blame that on King, I do think he was a breath of fresh air for the players and was certainly a relaxed guy that was kind of needed for the situation that the team found themselves in. But he just really, I don't think, had that prior experience to turn things around and have the Blackhawks consistently going in the right direction. But I am curious as to how this is all going to affect Derek King's future, because apparently he is going to be allowed to pursue other opportunities. I don't think he's getting a head coaching gig at the NHL, and it really kind of depends on what he wants to do. I feel like he'd be offered an AHL job most certainly at this point. Does he want to go back and coach at the AHL level? An NHL head coaching job just doesn't seem likely at all outside of Chicago. Or does he want to go elsewhere as an assistant? Of course, he could also come back to the Blackhawks and be an assistant, because right after this past season ended, the Blackhawks let go of both Rob Cookson and Mark Crawford. So Luke Richardson's going to have a new staff aside him this season, and maybe Derek King's someone that he considers. I don't know how much of this decision is going to be Richardson's or the front office. That's what's kind of the conflicting issue right now, is we don't know what King wants to do himself, and we also don't know if this is Richardson's decision or if the Blackhawks want to have some input in the process as well. But I feel like the Blackhawks would love to have Derek King back in some sort of role. I mean, he was just such an awesome dude, and his interviews were always classic. He kept things light. Probably not the guy to be a head coach, but I do think he's someone that the players would love to have around in a different role where he didn't need to be the guy per se. Like, he seems very loosey-goosey. Obviously, he was a player, a very successful player at that himself. He's been around the boys. He played in the old days of the NHL. He gets how things go and doesn't take things too seriously, keeps things light. I feel like a lot of players would like that. So if Derek King would want to come back, I feel like the Blackhawks would certainly be up for it. We'll have to find out if that's Luke Richardson's decision or not. But I think the Blackhawks could certainly do worse than having Derek King as an assistant coach. I mean, he already knows the team. He does know a lot of the young players as well, which is one thing I do believe could play into his favor. Like, he's coached already a bunch of these guys at the AHL level, and he's familiar with a lot of the players and what they need to improve upon and what they need to work at and get better at and what their styles are, how they need to be coached, what type of guys they are. You know, that's valuable input, especially where the Blackhawks find themselves right now, where the young talent is really all that matters at this point, especially since we're hearing there's Alex DeBrincat trade rumors, all that good stuff. The youth is really what's going to be priority number one over the next few years. And Derek King already knows a lot of the guys in the system. So that is one thing that certainly could work in his favor. I'm sure we'll hear more about Derek King in the next couple of weeks here. But super exciting times for the Blackhawks. We actually haven't said that in, man, it feels like forever. But I really am excited about the hiring of Luke Richardson. I just keep hearing how good of a guy he is. He has this presence about him that demands respect, and the players are they're fine with giving him that. He seems like a really good guy, a guy's guy. While at the same time, you know, he has this calm intensity and coolness about him. He's not out to get anyone, and he's not going to play games with any of the youngsters. He talks with the players. He's not playing games, as I've said a couple of times. He's telling players when they're going to get scratched, what their roles are. He's very proactive on situations. He's got experience with the young players. He's trying to prove himself. He's an NHL veteran, knows defense. Certainly a big thing that the Blackhawks need to fix. So for many different reasons, I'm really excited about the hiring of Luke Richardson. Again, though, time is only going to tell if this was the right call by Kyle Davidson. His first real big move. I mean, of course, you know, he made some trades throughout the year as well, but this is a big one that's going to set the tone for the Blackhawks rebuild, if you will. And I really hope Luke Richardson is the guy. He seems like a good dude, man. And I'm really stoked. First time in a while. I am really stoked. So I think that is going to take care of today, Friday, June 24th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks wherever you get your podcasts, and go and subscribe on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode and video as soon as it comes out each day. And after the show, you got to be sure to go and check out Locked On NHL for all the latest news, odds, and info ahead of Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final, which is coming up here in less than an hour. Go and check it out real quick. It's free and available on all platforms, so make sure to go and check out Locked On NHL wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And for any questions regarding anything related to the Blackhawks or to the show, don't forget that Monday's episode is Mailbag Monday. So be sure to leave your questions, either email them to me or drop them on any one of my Twitter accounts, and I'll pick a couple and answer them live on the show on Monday. Again, thank you all for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team